Yo, what is up, guys? Will here with Canyon from Fantasy Basketball Flock. We did the centers. Now we're bringing the top 12 tiered ranking list for guards. Going to be looking at guards. This was a tough list to make. I'm going to be completely honest. We're going to mention some honorable mentions who just missed out on the top 12. And honestly, those honorable mentions could probably go 5, 6, 7 deep. But, we got to call our shots. Got to call out who we like. Tier them out top 12. But before we get into that, if you guys could drop a like and subscribe to the channel, we're trying to win you some fantasy championships going through these rankings here. And also, while you're heading down, check out the description. The link to sign up for Underdog Fantasy using code Canyon will double your deposit, 100% deposit match up to $100 using code Canyon. Player props for the NBA through the NBA regular season into the playoffs as well. A ton of other sports on there as well if you want to check that out. But let's get right into the video. Canyon, lead it off. Who is the top guard?
Yeah, no surprise here. It's definitely Luka. Even though Kyrie came in, Luka's total points per game, fantasy points per game, went up from about 58 down to about 51 with Kyrie in there. The assists, I think, dropped a little bit. It's still obviously Luka. He's still going to be putting up 30-plus points a game, insane rebounding upside, insane assist upside. We really don't have to spend too much time on this. It's been Luka from the start of the season. It's going to continue to be him. He just does it all with such ease, high usage, even with Kyrie still there. So let's just keep going. This list gets very interesting, but right now it's not very interesting. It's definitely Luka at 1.
100%. Yeah. And yeah, like you mentioned, I mean, the numbers dipped a little bit with Kyrie. He's gotten some lower assist numbers just with the way that offense runs, but I mean, he's still dominant. I mean, the scoring is just still insane. And even with his lower stretch, over the past handful of games with Kyrie, he's still the top fantasy points per game if you even just look at his games with Kyrie among guards. So he's got to be in a tier of his own, number 1. Number 2 here, also in a new tier, but a tier of his own, we've got Damian Lillard. And a lot of this has to do, we don't want to react too much to recent stretches, but man, if you were going to overreact to a recent stretch, it would be with Dame. Crazy 71-point game. He's had insane scoring numbers. And honestly, the NBA, I mean, it's a star-driven league, and it's a who's hot league. And, that offense is going to continue to run through Dame through the end of the season. In his last 10, he's at 53.84 fantasy points per game. That would be better than what Luka's doing right now with Kyrie. Now, I'm not trying to make a conversation about that. Obviously, the expectation is still that Luka will be a more consistent fantasy points per game, points league dominator for the rest of the season. But I think Dame deserves the nod to be right below him in a tier of his own with what he's done.
Yeah, definitely. Finally deserves some respect here in a tier of his own there. And the next tier here, we've got a couple players. Leading it off, though, we're going to start with Ja Morant. Obviously, Ja's been killing it. I think he just had a pretty recent 30-point triple-double once again. The Grizzlies, they had a little bit of a rough patch, but Ja is still just a stat monster. His rebounding numbers are up this year, very much so. He's still averaging 27, 6, and 8. Assist numbers are also up. So Ja, just another guy that's going to fill the stat sheet everywhere. Such a high floor. Obviously, we know he can score, but with the rebounds and assist numbers being as high as they are this year, he should definitely be in the 3 spot here. There's some, obviously, a lot more talented guards still yet to come, but Ja's just very consistent. The usage is just insane, on a good team, on a high-paced team, and he's just continuing to show that he's got triple-double upside any night.
Next up here, we've got James Harden. And honestly, I mean, it was the expectation this season. We expected him to take a step forward, scoring the ball and have really strong assist numbers. It started off pretty hot, and he's had, cooled off a little bit from the scoring perspective, but he still has upside to give you strong scoring games alongside just an insane assist floor that he's going to provide. Still going to be a focal point with Embiid of that offense. I mean, I think he just deserves to be in this third tier here, obviously below guys like Luka and Dame, but I think from a consistency standpoint, the production he's going to give you, this is the right spot for him.
Yeah. And then last in this tier, we've got a guy you've probably been waiting to hear about. It's Shea, SGA here. He obviously could be so much higher. He's averaging 31, 5, and 6 with crazy defensive stats, but the lingering injuries are starting to catch up, unfortunately. I think it's the right ankle right now. It's been keeping him out a couple games, and he's going to be questionable for the rest of the season here, like throughout the rest of the season, if how much he'll play, because if everybody's healthy on this list, SGA deserves to be top 3, maybe 2 on this list. Just the scoring is insane. He obviously gets people involved. The defense is unlike any other guard on this list, but when you're talking about potentially missing some time, especially now in March when it's fantasy related and you're in your playoffs or you're in your championships, he's got to be knocked down a little bit, but he's just too good that when he does play, he's obviously got insane upside. Fantasy points per game total, I think he's second on this list, but with this nagging injury, and we know his injury history as well, really bad timing, so he's going to sit down here at 5.
Yeah, not to mention too, recently entering the COVID-19 protocols, it's just the health and safety protocols and, the injuries. I mean, you could argue if we look at this list at the end of the season, I mean, Shea's one of those guys where, if he's able to return soon, could finish right here at this slot, missing a couple games. But man, he's just one of those guys that's a huge range of outcomes, really hard to rank. But I think with what he's done this season, he deserves to be at this spot. But honestly, would not surprise me at all if we see Shea miss, unfortunately, a ton of time like we've seen in previous years too, come to the end of the season. I'm not going to call out any kind of weird tanking conspiracy theories, but he's just a guy where, if he's hurt and dealing with nagging injuries, they're going to keep him out. So he's one of those guys that feels a little bit riskier, but I think just being the second fantasy points per game guard, he deserves to be within the top 5. So we wanted to put him there. New tier here. I've got Trey Young up here, and it's kind of gross. Honestly, there's a lot of guards that I like more and I want to put above him, but just from a production standpoint, this is kind of where he's at. And, with the crazy assist floor he gives you on top of really strong scoring, it wasn't necessarily that way to start the season, and he's had a lot of inconsistencies, but man, if he's going to give you 26 and 10, like, he just has to be on this list in this tier up here. So I don't love it, but if you just look at the fantasy points per game, he's got to be right here.
Yeah, this is a fantasy list, all right? This is fantasy points per game. And when we talk about stats, Trey Young provides those. So, yes, I get it. It's a little weird having him this high, but he has to be. He just provides. Next up in the same tier, we've got Donovan Mitchell. Yes, it pains me that he's under Trey Young in this. But Donovan Mitchell's been having a career year. He's got the most points per game he's had in his career. His field goal percentage is the highest it's been in his career. And this move to Cleveland is just showing that he's just fitting in just as well as he could probably anywhere. He's just a pure scorer. He's another player who had a 70-point game this year already. So Donovan Mitchell, just elite scoring, and the peripherals, can be there. I mean, he had double-digit assists on that 70-point game, so we know he can provide assists here, whether Garland's in or out. I think he's going to be a stud and continue to be a stud and put up some high-scoring numbers because of how efficient he's been. And not to mention, a steal and a half a game is no slouch either. That really helps boost him up here.
Definitely. Next up here on the list, got Kyrie Irving, and he's a guy who, obviously new situation with the Mavs. It was tough to kind of figure out what that kind of production was going to be with a usage monster like Luka and the offense running through him, but it's kind of run through both of these guys. And, he's had really strong numbers in his 3-4 game stretch here with Luka. The first 3 games that he did play with Luka averaged 29, 6, and 4, which is just, insane compared to, what he's done earlier this season. That would have put him 3rd in fantasy points per game on this guard list specifically. So I don't necessarily expect that to maintain or continue and him to be able to put up that kind of scoring, but I still think we've seen Luka be productive with Kyrie. So I think both of these guys can be top 8 guards in the current situation, especially when you just look at this Mavs team, right? I mean, obviously they've got a decent number of shooters, around Luka and Kyrie, but I mean, the offense is just going to run through both of these guys, even though they both can be usage monsters in situations. This is the perfect kind of situation where, there's just not strong on-ball players around them to take away from the production that they'll give you.
Yeah, there's definitely there's an argument of there's only one ball in Kyrie and Luka, but it's well, it pretty much goes too deep there in that team. But Josh Green's been good. But yeah, Kyrie and Luka can't demand that much usage, and they will continue to do so. Next up here, another injury kind of ridden one. It's Steph Curry. Definitely could be higher on this list, but he's been out for a while now and will continue to be out, which we thought would be a lot later. But I think as of recording yesterday here, on March 1st, Woj tweeted that Curry is expected to be back next week sometime, which is really good news because he can come back and probably really impact some fantasy playoffs or championships. And so he's definitely getting slotted back in here. Not as high as he probably should be just because he isn't healthy, and some of you are playing your playoffs now or may start when he is still out. But him coming back definitely changes things, and we all know he can do. Will he be the same when he comes back? That's left to be to be seen. But a guy like Curry, like a pure shooter, should be able to come back and make an impact very quickly. Having another super underrated year, we kind of get a little bit privileged with what we've seen from Curry, and him averaging 30 points a game, 6 and 6 this year is absolutely unreal. Kind of forget about that with him being injured. So when he comes back, he can definitely be close to those numbers, if not continue to do what he's been doing. But again, he's going to be out for this week, and he should be back next week. That's the report right now, but we all know how that can go.
Right. Yeah, that's a tough thing with these top 12 lists, especially at this point in the season, right? If we're not making these lists heading into a full NBA regular season, we're coming down to the wire, with fantasy playoffs starting and, getting down to the end of the season. So a lot of these injury guys, you just have to push down rankings. But, with Curry, if he were to miss 2 to 3 games, I think this is where he would end up, because you expect him to, outproduce, most of these guys in this same tier that he's done this season. He probably should be up in the, James Harden tier, if he's fully healthy with the production he's had this season. But closing out this tier here, got Tyrese Haliburton, and it pains me to say this, to describe Hallie this way, but he's kind of like a mini Trey Young. I know I threw up in my mouth using that phrase, but just really, really insane assist floor. The only thing is, not as much scoring upside, but he definitely has that. He has that ability to kind of break the game a little bit with, the game he had against the Mavs, where he can just kind of pop off and have these really strong scoring numbers. It's just not something we've seen super consistent this season at that elite rate. Obviously the scoring numbers have improved on his last couple of years, but we haven't seen the elite scoring that we've seen on the rest of the guys on this list. I think he's the only guy who's right at that 20 points per game point on the rest of the guys on this list, and like right around what Harden gives you a little bit, with some defensive stat upside as well. Love Hallie. I think he deserves to be in this tier here. He's probably, you could comp him similar to, like a Harden with just lower rebounding numbers. That's kind of the production he's been giving you, but really, really strong season. Love Hallie a lot. And he can just give you those strong scoring games, but they just aren't consistent enough for him to be higher on this list.
Yeah, definitely. Last tier here to start it off, we've got DeAaron Fox. Have to show a Sacramento Kings some love with the season that they're having. And Fox having himself obviously a good season as well, averaging 25, 4, and 6. Pretty close to kind of his peak that he's been at with the Kings here, but, obviously adding in guys like Sabonis, Keegan Murray, Malik Monk, other scorers that like help this team win, he's still providing really good numbers, and he's been actually the most efficient he's been of his career this year. So, really capitalizing on having a valuable and very skilled team around him, and still producing a lot of numbers, still having good usage, and still having a really good upside. He's got 30-10 upside for sure. And this team is just clicking on all cylinders. The chemistry's great. If he's having a poor game, other people can pick it up, and they're relevant, which is a big thing, right? They're pushing for playoff seeding. They have to, games mean more around this time of the year. So Fox definitely has good upside, some defensive upside as well, but just a classic, guard that can give you 25 and 6 with higher upside too. He's got to be mentioned with how well he and the team are playing.
For sure. And then to close out the top 12, the last guy in this tier and the last guy on the list, we've got Devin Booker. And he's a guy who's moved down for us since the KD move. The expectation with when, KD's back and playing and healthy and full minutes and everything, the upside for Book scoring, which is obviously the main contributor to his fantasy production, since he's going to give you okay, but not great rebounding and assist numbers. But I do want to say, I feel like we have to give credit where it's due. A 37-point game in KD's first game with the Suns here. Now, KD didn't play full minutes, but he played decent minutes, just under 30, which is kind of, right around 30 is the expectation when he's fully healthy and playing. He is going to be on a minutes limit a little bit, so we'll probably see a little bit more consistent, strong scoring games from Book. But I do think that both of these guys can thrive, quote unquote, but I just don't think Book is going to have the scoring upside he would need to have to be higher on this list with his lackluster peripherals compared to the other guys on this list who have just elite assist numbers. But I still think, him giving 37, 6, and 7 is something that he definitely can still give you with KD, just because he is such an elite scorer. But I think from a fantasy production standpoint and a consistency production standpoint with KD, it's just tough to have him higher than 12th on this list. So that does it for the top 12. We do want to go through a couple honorable mentions, guys who just missed on the list. I think LaMelo Ball deserves to just be brought up. We did see the step forward that we were expecting the breakout here with LaMelo, but obviously injuries just killer. Going to be done for the season, but really, he probably should be up, in that Trey Young, Donovan Mitchell tier, if not higher, with the production he was giving you. But just wanted to call him out. Another guy, DeJounte Murray. He's another guy. Obviously for the Hawks, he's had pretty strong games, giving you decent peripherals and decent scoring numbers, but I just think the upside of the other guys on this list outweigh what Murray can give you, but I still think he deserves to be mentioned. We've got, we can mention guys like Zach LaVine, Jalen Brunson just having a monster scoring game. He's had a great year, but consistency in what we've seen this season, like I mentioned, other guys, we just like the upside more. And we could go on. I mean, we could talk about guys like Drew, Garland, Fred VanVleet, guys we like that deserve some recognition, but really prefer the upside of the other guys on this list. All right, let us know if we missed anybody, if you'd move around any of these tiers. Like I said, it's really tough. This list could probably go, 16, 17 deep of guys who deserve to be mentioned as top guards. There's just so many good fantasy producing guards, specifically in points leagues for sure. Would love to hear your input in the comments. Appreciate you guys watching, and we will see you in the next one.